Extra agendas, if anybody would like one. Audience, you need them? David? So, let's see. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for your understanding about delaying. Suddenly everything converged and I had to fire my kiln last Tuesday. I couldn't put that off.
You had to put it off?
I couldn't put that off.
Oh, you couldn't
That
put
had
it
to happen. Takes a lot of
Priorities.
organizational coordination. But fortunately we could put this off a week. Yeah, so right to it. Read and approve minutes. I have just one correction. I think it's a correction. Town Hall, October 4th. Was that actually the 8th or was it the 3rd? I think it was the 8th.
Yeah.
Sure. Other than that, everything was good to me.
8. Oh, 8, okay.
Anybody? We don't have to make a motion to change that, do we?
You can just note that. Clear.
All right. Does anybody want to approve them? Or
I make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So this is a special meeting, so we can't add anything to it. That's one of the reasons it's kind of lengthy. Didn't want to miss anything. We've got 3 letters came in as a result, I think, of the letter to the editor that I submitted and was published in the Chronicle. 2 of them are really specific to the committee. Those are one from Charles Salona and one from Vern Henschel. The third, Jeff Spicer, was really addressed to me specifically, and I'm just not clear how you handle something like that.
You don't have to read any of these. You just say we received these things. You distribute them to the committee, and just say we received these communications from these people.
Okay.
You don't have to.
So, they may come up later in the meeting, and if at some point, once we're into the meeting, let me just ask, does anybody on the board who's read the letters want to make any comments about them?
No, I think,
Okay.
you know,
We might as well move along. So the visitors today are from a firm called the Weston and Sampson Services. Is that correct? Is that the full name of your firm?
Well, my legacy is with Weston and Sampson Engineers, and my colleague, I'm Jack Joels, just as a note to correct my spelling.
Oh, okay, good.
J-O-L-L-S.
LL, okay.
And Bill Idarola with an I.
Idarola, not Andarola.
Is with an affiliated company, Weston and Sampson Services.
Right.
So Bill does not work in my company. I don't work in his. But we try to find areas where we can help each other, and this is one of them.
So your firm is Weston and Sampson?
Engineers.
Weston and Sampson Engineers?
Yes.
And your firm is?
Weston and Sampson Services.
Ooh,
And Engineers is a parent company, but we're actually 3 separate companies,
interesting, okay.
at least.
where are you located?
My office is in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. And our headquarters are in Reading, Massachusetts.
Is that REA?
R-E-A-D-I-G, Reading, Massachusetts, yes.
And you're out of?
My office is outside.
It's a truck.
I feel like have we met before? Were
Yes,
you down
he's the
at,
man.
Facility store.
down
Yeah.
at Sabre?
Right.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
do you want me to
Right,
give
you were showing us the quarter versus the nickel through the water.
Correct.
Yeah, so just a little introduction.
Uh-huh.
Jack came to my office saying he actually had watched the videos. He also has...
Jack is John?
John.
Yeah.
John Jack.
Okay.
Has,
I thought you
he
said third
attends-
person, yeah. isn't it?
He attends some meetings of First Selectmen
Right.
and trying to get business for his engineering company. And he'd been following with interest our efforts and came here about a year ago to say,
My interest was, I'm retired.
Yes.
And I'm an emeritus employee of the engineering firm. I spend discretionary time doing what I think I can do to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And my interest was in financing small systems, and that was my first discussion with Gordon Ridgway, talking about how to do that and what the options might be, because as we move forward, we'll probably find clean water funds not as abundant as they once were. The irony is that USDA funding is in abundance if you have a project that qualifies and an owner that qualifies. And I believe you do.
Do you know Steve?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
not well, but we've run across each other.
Time to time. Yeah. Yes.
One of the things I was curious about when Gordon mentioned that you'd been following what we were doing,
Yes.
where do you follow something like this?
On your website, I watched your videos.
Okay. Did you hear about it in the news at some point and then went to the website? Or?
I don't remember how I heard about it, okay? And I say that with all candor, I don't remember. But my own interest has been in community systems and their development, because we're finding in the marketplace that these systems are going to be built not for pollution abatement purposes, but more so for economic development purposes. And that's true on the shoreline where you visited in Old Saybrook. And just as a historical note, beginning in the 60s, wastewater facility planning had started along the shoreline from the Connecticut River going east all the way to Branford. And there was a proposal at one time to build a plant to discharge into the Connecticut River that would collect flows from all of the 4 towns going west from Old Saybrook. And there was a vote. And 3 of the towns passed it, and the one that did not was Old Saybrook. And that has been the initiation of what has become the sewer avoidance program on those communities for the last 50 years or so.
Sewer avoidance.
Avoidance.
Yeah.
There's no collection system anywhere on Route 1
Really? Wow.
going all the way to Branford.
Because there's no place to discharge it.
No, we don't want it. They do not, for fear of what development might be stimulated. And then if you go there today, you can see what has resulted, development.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could talk about this for a long,
Yeah,
long
but
time. Let us get into.
I'm just giving you
Yeah,
some
no, that's
background.
great, and thank you very
so
much for coming.
I stopped by to see Gordon and said,
Yeah.
how you've been talking about financing. This is
Right.
an interesting project.
So we have you here mostly, or primarily, as part of the discussions about operations and maintenance.
Right.
That's how your name has come up.
Right.
And we will get to that.
Yeah.
But the other elements of your knowledge and understanding would be really very interesting to hear more about. It may not be tonight, but maybe we can do another meeting. Yeah.
Whenever.
Todd, could I just ask
Yeah.
a question, since I'm very unfamiliar with that part of the state and Route 1 and all of that? When you say that they have a sewer avoidance mentality,
It's not a mentality, it's a policy.
okay, so, all right, but it's driven by the attitude of the electorate that did not want development, is that correct? But you're saying now that they got development despite that?
That's my opinion. And
Okay.
the sites that you visited, particularly the Old Saybrook site, that's representative of the development, so.
That's the shopping center?
The shopping center, yeah.
So in other words, they've had development, but they didn't have septic, or they didn't have community septics. They worked around it.
We worked around it. You can look at it as what happened in the computer industry. There were mainframes and minis, And then the solution became microcomputers. And the same is happening in wastewater and sewer avoidance communities. Those who cannot meet DPH specifications for on-site treatment are building their own. And I think you experienced that.
So the developers are building.
The developers are.
The developers are building the solutions rather than the
If you go
municipalities.
to Clinton Crossing, there's a wastewater treatment plant there, maybe you visited that, I don't know.
No,
But what we saw, I think also talking to the people down in Saybrook, was the development was primarily along the shoreline. Once you go back to the old section of Saybrook, it's pretty empty because there was no systems installed there. So the places that were on the beautiful view of the sound or whatever, or had some systems, or where they wanted to put in a shopping center, they put in a system, but it wasn't, like I say, the development wasn't uniform or even
Right.
even.
But if you, did you meet Steve Mangillo?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
he's the director of the Old Saybrook WPCA. And they're working through what was the solution to a water pollution problem, and that still exists. And the Old Saybrook, forgive me, I won't belabor the point much further, but the Clean Water Fund was used to fund the repair and modification of on-site systems, which is an unusual application of the Clean Water Fund. But even that is not a possible solution for numerous properties that are particularly on the beachfront. And from a property density perspective, it's not unlike West Cornwall.
and all the treatment facilities have leach field
Yes.
areas, right? There's nothing, there's no,
So now the solution
Water.
that is in mind and developing, and it's, go to their website and read their minutes as this story unfolds, and I think they're going to be facing a community wastewater treatment system and a collection system along the beachfront, particularly the beachfront communities. Yeah, and we'll see how it gets funded.
They were underwater for
Yeah,
30, 40 years to build a treatment plant and collection system, and they just rather spent their money on legal fees and build something.
And funded it, yeah.
every major consultant in Connecticut has at one time or another done a version of their facility plan, including Weston and Sampson.
WMC. So they've spent a lot of money, but not shuffling,
No.
not installing systems.
are you competitors?
Yes,
Okay.
we're friendly.
Okay.
Well, in the design side of things, yes. In the maintenance and operation,
How did you miss our original?
I don't know that we did, it
Call.
was several years ago.
Okay. Oh, you weren't around several years ago?
I wasn't with West, I retired in 2005
Okay.
and did some
A QBS effort,
things like that.
and we found Steve.
And Jack, when was your first contact with our first selectman?
I would say probably a little over a year ago would be, Gordon. Yeah, a little over a year ago, and then I kept in touch.
Yeah, he's persistent.
And then when you had your town meeting and appropriated the funds to seek funds, and I said, looks like they're going to design and build, and maybe there's an opportunity for Weston and Sampson Services to be part of this project, which is, it's a cool project, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
It's an interesting project.
Yeah.
It's the first time we've ever heard that about West Cornwall.
Only some of it. I think it's cool. A lot of the people I speak to out and about, think it's
I mean,
incredibly
the
cool.
same thing's happening if you go down to, back to the beach. Westbrook's facing, the downtown area of Westbrook has no sewers, and they are constrained in their economic development because of the lack of sewers.
Okay, let's just get through some of this other stuff. We've got to submit our 2020 meeting schedule. So it's my understanding that we can just continue the second Tuesday of the month if we would like. I looked at the calendar and didn't see any conflicts. I may be wrong, but of the upcoming year. So I could just tell Vera we're gonna go ahead and do the second Tuesday of every month. I'll tell her the dates.
At 5 PM here, right?
5 PM here. I am not gonna be here March, I know that. We could go ahead and put it on the schedule and then cancel it if we feel there's no need for a meeting, or you guys could hold it. I've had a little discussion with Betsy, and she's more than happy to run the February meeting. Also, I can't be here. I've got a daughter who's giving birth to hopefully my 5th grandchild in Pittsburgh, so we're gonna, they now can schedule it by day, by hour, you know, so.
Don't count on that.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not gonna be here February, but Betsy says she'll run the meeting February. I'll be here January, no March, and I'll be back for April, so. Anybody got any problems with second Tuesday of the month, 5 PM
Nope.
here?
Do we need a motion?
Is that a motionable event?
Good idea.
I motion.
I second.
So motioned, seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good, that's that. So now let's turn to Steve and his, this is pretty much the same as what was on the last agenda. More discussion about the timeline and the progress you're making to get this application in, right? So let us
Yep.
hear what you're
Well, we made
accomplished.
good progress. We've got the environmental report is done. The engineering report is pretty much done. The application process, as we might have talked about last time, is now electronic. This is this 48-page document right here. You have to fill out the 48 pages in order to be able to obtain an application.
Of course.
And it required my guy John, I was telling Gordon earlier, they wanted to know the color of his eyes. Literally. His mother's maiden name. It was worse than Homeland Security going through, just to get to the point where we qualified to get the application.
Bizarre.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. But we managed to do that.
Okay.
So we're working on the application. So the application will be completed within the next couple of weeks. We've been working with USDA Norman over there to try to, because it's not a simple process. It was simpler before. With the electronic, you'd think it'd be easier, but it's not. Everything's linked and everything's kind of a nightmare to go through. But we're wending our way through it. So I would guess that certainly before the end of the year, the application, I have a notice prepared that has to be put in a publication, a local publication that announces that you intend to apply for a grant through USDA, which I can give to Gordon tonight, and then I can tell him when it's appropriate to get that published. It has to be with a certain number of days of submitting the application. We worked on the cost opinion, as we probably talked about last time. It's in the environmental report, in the engineering report. We bumped up the cost due to several factors.
Do you have a page of that?
I do. Well, actually, I've got copies of the draft. Is it appropriate to give up the environmental part of this, Gordon? That becomes public information?
It's fine, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I got some copies of that.
In talking to you, it seemed like both the environmental and the, what's the other one?
Engineering
The engineering portion are basically this final
Yeah.
draft, right?
Yeah, basically, we took the overall report. Interesting enough, when we did the original report, our call to duty was to do the engineering report part of it, but because we had enough funding, we went through the environmental issues as well. It was out of our scope of service, but we had enough money to do that. So now we've broken the environmental out from the engineering side of things into the two separate reports, which are required by USDA.
So this is the environmental.
Are we within budget?
I bumped up the numbers. As you know, if you come in under $5 million, you stay local in terms of the Connecticut section of the USDA, so we strive to stay in that. I bumped up the treatment plant costs, I bumped up some of the...
Is that this page too?
Yes.
That's for the purpose of the application?
For the purpose of the application, right. Plus the fact that we're not sure if you're going to go ahead of the project, number one, but when are you going to go ahead of the project? So I've escalated some costs up because obviously time means money to people. The costs are...
So what are some of the numbers you up? Just give us the,
Pardon me?
what did you up the numbers to, or percentage-wise, or whatever?
Well, it's up to $4.9 million overall from 3.9, so $1 million overall.
And that's assuming,
That's for application purposes, yeah.
and that's
So
assuming,
25% increase.
Something, Close, yes.
Yeah.
That's assuming a site as
4.9
close to the river as we can get.
4.9 up from our budget of 3.9.
So that includes contingencies, a large contingency, as you can see, well, I don't have the breakdown in front of you, but I have a breakdown of the numbers which I can share if you want.
Yeah, I think you should.
And I'll send this out to you because this is my only copy probably. But for example, we have a 20% contingency, design and administration costs, incidentals to construction, and I've inflated it for 3% per year to 2021. So.
Steve,
I-
what I don't understand is, we've been futzing around with this thing. You said it was easy. It's been a 3-month delay, and now you tell us that, some of these things are happening? I mean, does that mean you did nothing the last 3 months?
No,
Well, then why did you only discover these things now?
discover what thing, Joanne?
Well, you just said that there were some new requirements
Because they
and
just came
new
out with
forms.
they just came out with the electronic version of the application.
So if we'd applied 3 months ago, we wouldn't have had to deal with the
Not necessarily.
electronic
Not
version,
necessarily,
but possibly.
possibly.
But the cost increases aren't as a result of you having to apply online.
No.
Is that what you're suggesting, Joe?
No, I'm suggesting what the hell's been going on for the last 3 months when he said he was working on it.
Well, I think,
Well,
when
he's-
did I get the official go-ahead to do the process?
Uh,
It wasn't
I
3
don't know.
months ago.
It was, yeah. September, maybe, it sounds right? Yeah.
It might have been.
I would refer back to
I'm-
the minutes that this committee has been sitting and waiting month after month for something from Steve.
I think his work
That's
schedule's
an
been entirely,
opinion.
I think his work schedule's been entirely appropriate, and I think we heard last night, the federal government, anybody who's been in these business knows this takes time. And I think Steve has been diligent and accurate with his things.
You'll have an answer on your grant in plenty of time for your town meeting if you decide to go forward with town meeting.
But if we get this in by December 31st,
Yeah.
when would you expect
I would
us
say
to
within a
hear?
month to 6 weeks, we'll have, they'll have some responses to us. If there's going to be questions and comments, it's never perfect when you submit it the first time. They're going to have questions. No question about it.
Steve, do you get to confer with them while you're doing it?
Yes.
I know that's been helpful
Yes.
in my
Oh,
case
definitely
sometimes,
helpful. No,
yeah.
they've been through it. Norman, St. Jean's, very helpful.
Okay.
And so Norman St. Jean will go back to you as soon as he gets it and say, what about this, what about that, or somebody will?
There's a regional engineer up in Northampton or Amherst, one of the two towns,
Right.
that goes through the engineering report and the environmental report.
So that should, what do you say, take a month,
I'm
6 weeks, something
Yeah.
like that from the submittal date?
Because they're obviously accepting applications or interested in applications. So,
So when you develop this cost summary, which sections of the town were included,
we're just in the base area.
which is
The
defined
village.
as?
Well, it's in the report, the main report, but it's basically the business area town. The residential homes on the outside are not included in that.
So Railroad Square,
Yeah.
down Route 128, nothing down Low River
No.
Road,
No,
so it's
No.
sort of an L
yes,
down to a
Yep.
facility.
yep. Exactly.
The inspection, Steve, could you just summarize that?
Basically, when you do a USDA project, you have to comply with their regulations for the design of the project, and also they can require construction inspection to be performed and testing as the project is built. So that covers, and there's another thing called incidentals to construction. Incidentals are typically, they include construction inspection, they include testing, they include other minor items that are all associated with construction of the project.
Yeah, that's a normal thing with a large project, yeah.
Absolutely, very normal.
What about the cost for acquiring property?
That's in your, well,
I'm sorry, Betsy, I didn't hear you.
I asked what about the cost of acquiring property?
Uh-huh.
I don't want to put that number out right now, but I have accounted for,
It's in there
Yes.
somewhere?
When you say an L, can we go back to that? Do you mean like from like Railroad Plaza and then down 128 or
Yeah, I think of it this way, Railroad Plaza, down when,
across?
into,
Does it include the market and the
yes,
post office
yes,
area?
yes.
okay,
Goes
so
up
it's
that
it's
It goes
more
up
of a
far.
T,
Yeah, it's about,
That
about
far.
the end of it, right there, yeah.
the market down and then
Yeah.
the Railroad Plaza.
Yep.
And just straight down the street?
And is it assuming a treatment center that has the same EDU capacity as
Yes.
the one that's in
Yes.
the original report?
Yes,
Okay.
the base area. So for your interest, we're talking about a flow in the range of 12 to 13,000 gallons per day.
Yeah, well, that seems like you've done quite a lot of thinking.
When we had the
about all
town
this.
meeting, were we talking 3.0?
Well, it's in this original report here, so I'm assuming he's just taken the same numbers, right?
It's gone to 4.9.
No, I mean the EDUs,
Oh,
the size of it. So, I mean, my concern is you don't want to build a facility that simply
It's a lot of.
services what's there now. The concept is for it to
right, future.
able to absorb whatever might come along.
But the possibility of growth is there, is it not? By putting nodes, I don't know what the
Well,
language is,
but the plan itself has to be able to
I've
process.
accounted for a reasonable amount of growth in this overall, but yet, as we've talked about many times, due to the public input on surrounding, particularly residential areas, they really have no interest in being
At the
involved in
moment,
this.
they have no,
Having said that, if in the future, for some reason, the Department of Health comes down and says, you know, you've got to
Yeah.
do something, then there's capacity there at the plan, but the design of the collection system is going to be their responsibility at this point. That's not part of the construction plan.
do you have any way of estimating what the present flow would be for that grouping of
Not
buildings?
much, it's pretty vacant up there.
Yeah, just 'cause it's vacancy.
Yeah. It's probably 5,000 gallons a day, today, if that.
Yeah, so what you're suggesting though, at 13,000 would be, is if it was all fully
Yeah,
functioning,
yes,
what would it be under those circumstances? Would it be,
13,000,
that would be,
average daily flow. Pete just asked me about that question. We go by two things in the design plans. It's average daily flow, and then you have to account for peak flows.
Right.
Peak diurnal flows, which you have a peak in the morning and a peak in the evening typically, particularly for residential areas. Get more commercial here, but.
so you're assuming that there'll be no more construction? Simply usage of what's there?
You can, that would allow for some future construction. Where are they going to construct things? Not a whole lot of
Right.
room there for much of anything else.
Right. That's
Yeah.
my question,
Yeah.
is that's your assumption.
Correct.
But we could see, and we would likely to see, based on what you said earlier, conversion of residential to,
Yep.
to commercial
Or-
activities.
Yeah, or yes, that would work wonderfully there, in my opinion,
Or a combination.
or a combination. You're seeing more and more of that, the mixed use everywhere.
but Steve, what you're thinking about, if there were additions made, residential properties turning into commercial ones, would that stress the system we're thinking about having?
I'm saying at this point, no, it's tough to predict. If all of a sudden, wow, West Cornwall becomes
Yeah.
the commercial center of northwestern Connecticut, we
Yeah.
can't accommodate that. But reasonable growth and within the footprint that we just talked about, can be accommodated.
Yeah, I mean, I think these would all be questions that Board of Finance would want to have had some discussion about, along with perhaps zoning.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to
Town.
the zoning issues, planning issues, your plan of conservation development comes into play here, which they targeted this area for that type of activity, say.
I'm trying to find the number that appeared in the original final
It's
draft.
3.9 roughly.
Yeah. The EDUs though.
Oh,
No, no,
EDUs? Oh, it's probably going to go to 20. Yeah, something like that.
20?
Yeah, say 20 to 25.
So this is half the size of this original plan? The
No, that's EDUs.
That was my question.
Yeah, no, the EDU count, again, it's estimated, and EDUs aren't necessarily one unit per building.
No, I get that.
You remember that,
Yeah.
commercial and residential, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera. So
But wasn't that number 60?
60 is a larger area.
60 was the EDU, though.
Yes,
The
but
larger
for a
area.
larger area, though. For a larger area, not this core area that you're targeting at this
So
point.
the core area here is half of that 30.
Something of that nature.
Oh, estimated daily
Equivalent
usage.
daily usage.
Yeah, okay.
Equivalent daily.
Dead dwelling units.
I'll reconfirm that as well. That's all part of the reports that'll be submitted to USDA. Because what's critical to USDA is also how is this being paid for. Obviously, we're hoping that you're going to get a grant and a low-interest loan, but we've also talked about the town sharing some of these costs through general taxation, both in construction and operation and maintenance. So they'll be looking to the town for that.
Steve, do you have a comparable town that's in the same situation, or past tense, have you?
This is a pretty unique situation in terms of the funding of this project, because my opinion is, even with a very large grant percentage, the cost per EDU is very, very high, okay? To the point where I'm not sure the people would vote for it. Having said that, if the town is interested in participating in the capital cost and the operation maintenance cost, then it becomes more affordable per EDU per unit. But it's very rare for sewers to be built where the users and the people with frontage on it, the people that access the sewer, it's very rare for people outside of those areas to be paying for those sewers.
Right, we understood that, yeah. So just to stay on this EDU thing for a second. Page 25 of the final report says area flow estimate table, base areas with 30 homes is 13,500.
Yeah,
Railroad
So
streets,
EDUs might be more than that, because if there's 30 homes in you'd be up a little bit higher EDU count. Because you typically, as you said, one home, as I said, one home is typically one EDU, but you have commercial development there too, so those commercial people have a higher number, typically a higher number of EDUs per commercial building.
the point I'm making is that Railroad Street sub-area has 3,600, so now we're at 16,500 EDUs. Now, believe me, I'm not trying to pin you down to what precisely we're going to be building, but I also don't want to end up, just because of the balancing the cost with a unit that's undersized.
Mm-hmm.
We got to really, you know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I think my numbers are relatively conservative in terms of the flows to be able to accommodate future issues. I know you've asked me that since we started this project, and I've really paid attention to that to really try to make sure that we didn't say, oh, gnats, I don't want to use words, gnats assing it down to the gallon, exactly for these 5 buildings here and have no room for growth or expansion. We've been cognizant of that all along, so.
I mean, to just build something that'll accommodate what's there now seems like short-sighted.
It's potentially short-sighted.
Yeah.
Right, I agree.
Because there's almost nothing there now.
In terms of?
There's
No.
activity.
No, you're right.
There's a few
There's
homes.
there's very little activity.
Yeah.
As I said, I don't even think you're putting 5,000 gallons. in.
Right, no, I heard that. But even if we were to double that, once you,
Yeah,
then we're close to
yeah.
the limit on the EDUs.
That's a high usage. And, commercial, I don't see a whole lot of high water usage commercial going in there, to be honest with you. It can happen. But typically there's a mix of retail and dry retail type of thing and residential.
I think we see that, it's not going to be much dry retail because we see that drying up everywhere. It's going to be restaurants.
Oh, that could be the case. Is there a restaurant there now even?
Yeah, a little one.
Yeah,
Where is it?
RSVP,
Oh, I didn't know it was there, to be honest with you.
you like it that way.
Yeah. For
They're only
somebody's
open weekend nights.
Oh, okay, that's why,
So they're all
okay.
exclusive.
So, anybody have any other questions about this timeline and progress? And I mean, we're,
For the minutes,
Yeah.
would it be correct to say the application to the USDA will be done by the end of the year? Is that
Absolutely.
how you would
I've
want
put,
it?
I've put 12/31/19
Absolutely.
on.
Okay,
I'm gonna hold them to it.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
okay.
No, I mean,
I would have
just
been
making
advanced to
sure.
that too.
Okay.
We got a pretty good handle on it now, so.
Todd, one of the things that concerns me is the vote that we had that was the town meeting that was overwhelmingly in favor of the expenditure of, what was it, how many $1,000?
10,000.
$10,000. That I believe that this board and definitely the Board of Selectmen may be misreading the result of that vote. because I don't think, based on, and Steve has said it since the very beginning, he has not seen other towns that have found widespread support across the town, when it comes right down to it, to pay for other people's septic. And I think there's been a possibility of a serious misreading. When I talk to people who voted for the $10,000, they really didn't understand what they were voting for. And I don't think that's unusual. We all know that on our own issues, we all get interested when it comes right down to the dollars at a point in time. And I think we have to listen carefully to Steve's extensive experience about the fact that that is not a reality. I mean, when I first joined this committee, it was one of the things that I was very much in favor of, was town-wide taxation and support for this, because I believe that the health of West Cornwall is essential to the health of Cornwall itself as a town. But I think we should encourage the town to have a vote that clearly asks the question, are you willing to have your taxes increased to pay for the capital expenditure and the ongoing maintenance? Because as Steve said, it's too big a burden for the individual homeowners. And I think that the people deserve to have their voices heard and not to have their vote interpreted. We just need a little clarity. And I would feel very good about having this board encourage the Board of Selectmen to have that kind of vote.
Okay. So, you have that in the minutes there, Don?
I'm working on it.
I feel like we've been moving in that direction all along. The town vote that we had in July was very specific to appropriating some more funding to enable an application to be made to the USDA. And once we have made that application and find out what kind of granting may be available to us, we'll know better what the cost burden to the town may be. And at some point in the not too distant future, that specific question as to whether or not the town would be willing to support a project such as this will be put on a ballot and be asked. But you can't ask them without asking a very specific thing, and we don't have enough of the details yet to get that specific.
And could I just comment, we had the informational meeting where the finances were addressed, and
Well, Todd just said the finances can't be addressed yet.
no, but the potential, Joanne, given an estimate of a cost, which is all that the best we can do at this point, the finance committee commented that, they commented on the effects on the taxes. So if that information was put out there, yes, it wasn't specific, it was.
Yeah, you're right, it wasn't specific.
But it did address those concerns.
I don't believe that it did, and I don't think we should be fearful of having
You're
a
entitled
vote
to that
that would be
opinion, Joanne,
clear.
but it's just an opinion.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay,
and so
it's
is
in the
Betsy's.
minutes, and
But it's very difficult, truthfully,
Yeah,
to address this burden sharing issue, which I happen to agree with Joanne completely, that my hope is that we can get the town to understand and buy into this, to relieve the burden on West Cornwall villagers. But putting something like that out there is just so tough, because if you say, okay, here's a number, boom, 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 over 10 years or something like this, no one is ever going to forget what you said. And as it changes, goes down, goes up, does anything, those same original numbers will be in people's minds.
I'm not
And it
asking
is
for that, though, Lisa.
extremely tough to deal. You need the flexibility to wait until you've got a really pretty good handle on what is going to happen
I think one of the
financially.
key issues is the grant situation.
right,
That's-
that's not just
Yeah.
one of the key, it's the key issue.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, because
But you just said regardless of the amount of the grant.
Oh, it's.
That was your language, and I think we could just check it on the tape. Regardless of the amount of the grant, you said it was still a substantial burden, and
Yes.
your experience, we're paying for your experience.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to use your experience
No, I agree with you
to
100%.
get
That's exactly
a
what I said.
real clear
Yeah.
reading from the town before we do a tremendous amount more
Yeah,
work.
well, My experience also is that when the town vote, as Todd mentioned, the town vote comes around, if the town
Yeah.
decides to vote on the project,
Yeah,
the financing is explained thoroughly at that point to the people, so they exactly know what they're voting on, and they will fully understand whether there'll be a tax burden on the general public or not. And that's what typically the towns vote on.
I just think that the process we went through this summer was very educational. I think people there knew what they were voting on. There wasn't this confusion other than in Joanne's head of what people were voting on. I think people there, because there was so little discussion at the vote, people were going to vote yes, they were going to vote no. They knew the concept. And I think the information was there, and we need to get on with the grant proposal and come back in the spring, and that's the time schedule we're on.
Steve, you've had, or your understanding, or you've had assurances from USDA that we're a good candidate for the
Yes.
45%,
Correct. 40%.
40 to
There's even been a
45.
hint of higher than that,
Yeah.
potentially 70%, which,
Is that right? I've never heard that.
Well, that would be for a community of great need, and you know where we are
Yeah.
on that schedule
there's a
of
lot.
wealthy towns.
That's what they
Steve,
said.
when
that's what they said we met with them, so.
what's the estimate of the time if you have the whole paperwork done by the end of December?
No,
How long do they take to process
He
them?
said
Well,
by 6 weeks.
It's not a process, don't use the word process. They're not gonna process, quote unquote, anything until a town meeting makes a positive vote. An
But they
application,
come back to us with,
that, they're gonna come back with this, to comments, questions, this and that, revise the numbers, what about this, what about that,
and
we'll
then
revise
following
it.
that, what happened?
And then you're gonna decide, town fathers are gonna decide whether to go to a town meeting vote.
So when they come back to us, they're gonna have a percentage that
Yeah.
they'll cover?
Yeah, but it won't be in writing necessarily.
That's fine, but will it be, what's the
It's a
timeframe
potential.
to get to that point?
A few months, I would say.
2 months, 3
Yeah.
months?
I think fairly quickly, we can get a warm feeling as to what they're willing to, what they got for money. As Jackie had mentioned, they seem to have money, so that's a positive thing.
But the
And they-
70% would be if we were under a court order or injunction, which
I
Torrington
don't know
Area
that for
Health
a
has
fact,
made
but
clear
certainly
that we're not.
I'm not sure that's the case,
I
but,
don't think that would be the case.
sorry,
I don't think that would be the case at all.
yeah, Jack says he doesn't think it would be the case.
So what do you think, Jack, would be the case to get 70%?
I don't know. I haven't had any conversations with.
But you're
USDA.
sure it wouldn't have anything to do with being under a court injunction? You're sure about that?
Am I sure of that? No, I'm
I'm
in
such a king to court. The bottom line is, Joanne, the under order would enhance the application should the town be competing against other potential projects.
But
Jump
Torrington
ahead.
Area Health has said that they have no intention of doing that.
Well, it's not a Torrington Area Health issue.
Oh.
It's a Department of Energy and Environmental Protection issue. And they have no intention.
But I thought
to-
that was only if it went over 5 million.
No, it has nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing to do with it. You're confusing, 5 million has to do with the grant process through
Okay.
USDA, okay? Nothing to do with the DEP. But to enhance the town's position in terms of obtaining a grant amount favorably, it would be potentially beneficial, and it's not necessary, to be under order. DEP has indicated they are reluctant, and they will not put you under order, because there's no known pollution, quote unquote. We found one well that was contaminated, the river testing didn't show impairment. You need a smoking gun to be put under a DEP order.
Okay, thank you.
You know, we keep talking about, the future tense of what would happen if we move forward. But the negatives, if we don't move forward, we talk about the pollution in the river, there's a whole, line items of things that are negative. So and the town, I thought just the presence, the number of people that showed up for the information meeting was really impressive. They cared enough to come to this meeting, and they certainly gave a positive raise of hands on moving forward. So I think we're going in the right direction. And we've got to continue this.
So let's just segue on now to the cost estimate, which you've given us in this cost summary, so we can take that as face value, that this is for a system for the base area that's as close to the river as we can legally get it, or as DEP will allow. It's not
Close
in
to the
100,
center, close to the center.
not in 100-year flood zones
Yes,
and that kind of.
yes.
And there's no dollars in here at all for O&M, operation and maintenance, correct?
No, that'll be included in the engineering side of things, which we had in our original report, and that's one of the reasons, well, not one of the things, but one of the reasons we invited
Yeah.
these folks in,
That's
to
what
take a
I'm,
look at it and say,
so that's what I'm moving towards, to have you guys weigh in a little bit on your opinions about the cost of
What does it cost to run one of these?
run one of these things.
Bill,
It's this size.
based on what I've been hearing for size-wise, and most likely class of plant, you're looking at an operation that's probably going to be required by DEP for 3 hours of workday of the class 3 operator, and what you're probably looking at for total cost is about $6,000 a month, which would include operations, labor, lab testing, materials. What's not included in that estimate would be utilities and any kind of residuals removal, sludge falling, that sort of thing.
Right, but we want to include all that. We want to get a real number, not a,
Right,
Close
but you
enough.
can't really estimate sludge falling in utilities until you actually know what kind of strength you're dealing with.
I mean, until it's actually functioning?
Right, stronger waste requires more electricity. I mean, you can come up with an engineering estimate.
yeah, if you could think about a ballpark, and we initially had a number in there, something like $70,000 per year to operate the system, and we're just curious enough, that sounds like it's in the realm
Yeah,
of things.
that's right in our ballpark for.
Well, yeah, 72 is,
Yeah, that's,
but that's without this. But at one point I heard just up that to more like 125.
I could, that's what I'm asking, we're trying to get handle.
And
You
the
said
other-
6,000 per month?
But
Yeah,
I would
about
think that the
6,000.
Board of Finance is going to need real hard numbers
Does
about
that,
this kind of thing, or?
does it include any employment of a manager in
Yeah.
that calculation?
Well, basically,
Yeah.
what you have, and I don't want to speak for them, but basically, the main person in this plant is the operator, who's a grade 3 or 4 operator. And that's your main cost, is the labor cost. And that's what he's referring to.
Okay,
right,
And that's the person that runs the plant.
right, and at that cost, you're including your lab testing, materials, chemicals. That could be plus or minus depending on what your strength is. And from what Steve was saying, you're probably going to be starting in at 5,000 gallons per day,
Yeah.
which is under the 13,000 that's estimated. So you're not going to be paying full bill on electricity. You're not going to be paying full bill on sludge hauling and stuff, because it's all related to the strength and
Usage,
flow. You know, and then there's also the consideration of whether you're going for, solar energy or anything like that, because any kind of grant work with solar energy is going to reduce your electric bill.
Uh-huh.
So that's.
Oh, we like solar.
The 6,000 bill included the operator?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so that's operator labs and materials.
Yeah, the main thing is the electricity, and then there's, how often do you have to pump out the Sabre facility, roughly?
Well, see, with Sabre, we're dealing with a high-strength waste, and we're at the limit of our permit, so we're pumping out probably, well, we pump a certain load every quarter, and then based on the buildup of the solids in the system, we pump out about every month and a half or so.
Yeah.
What constitutes high-strength waste versus low-strength waste?
Well, you're going to be looking at your BOD and your total nitrogen.
BOD?
BOD is biochemical, or different names, but oxygen demand. And basically, wastewater from residents is different from wastewater from commercial, different from,
Which is
a
high-strength?
brewery.
Residents or commercial?
Residents is not necessarily, that I would say, you're more experienced than I am, it's not that high-strength.
Residential BOD is about 150 parts per million.
Yeah, that's fairly low.
From a grocery store or a restaurant, it could be 600 plus.
Yeah, which is high.
So high-strength is restaurants and commercial?
Yeah.
Yeah, restaurants.
So home, what happens in a home
If
is...
you take in a dairy or a mushroom.
Oh, yeah.
Then that number will go up.
Yeah, yeah.
A mushroom what?
Mushroom plant.
Plant?
Or a
Wow.
distillery, right?
Farm.
And
Or a
You think
Got a
distillery?
marijuana farm.
That's the distillery. The
Cheese
thing is,
factory.
there's also pre-treatment requirements for certain facilities, grease removals and other pre-treatment requirements for high-strength waste.
Okay.
And residential typically are lower because people take showers and they wash things, and the dilution is a solution of pollution, so the strength.
Right, the other thing is if you have a high-strength user, you can always build that user
Right.
based on their strength.
Right,
Their population equivalent, right, for waste.
So
that-
on
yeah.
your facilities, there's one that, we saw a condo place, and then there was another place, then we had the shopping center. What typically would the utilities and the other thing run as a percentage of that? The things you're not including, the pump out and the
We
utility.
supply the operations,
Right,
we don't pay the utilities.
okay.
What the utilities are also depends on the technology and the strength of the waste.
I think we can go back to Salisbury School, for example, which is a little bit larger plant, but similar.
And get a
They gave us
percentage.
numbers there, I don't recall what they are, but I can go back
Yeah.
and revisit that.
Okay.
Because they pay for everything.
If you have
Right.
a similar technology, you can
Yeah.
use.
Yeah, and that's the same
existing
similar
sources
technology.
to estimate.
Well, for Board of Finance, I think that the two elements are capital expense, which the USDA is hopefully going to help with, and then operation and maintenance, which
The other
in a
thing you have to
perfect world,
consider is repairs and capital expenditures, I think.
well, and operation and maintenance would include repairs, I would think.
Well, it depends, if you have a pumps.
It does, but then typically what people do is they have a kind of a capital reserve fund, or various names for it, but they don't just collect enough money from the users and/or from the town to pay for just the operation and maintenance fees. They're building up a fund at the same time.
They who you're referring
The
to?
town
The town.
would be doing
This
building up
wastewater-
a
What we're
fund.
talking about is routine maintenance.
Right.
Day-to-day.
That's what, yeah.
Right, but
you have a
my
fund there
point
for
is
the
that
future.
in a perfect world, the users would pay for the operations and maintenance.
Correct.
But we have to somehow bridge the gap from where we are with 5,000 EDUs to the larger. So
Right.
Board of
Until you
Finance
actually have
has
the
to,
asset,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to estimate capital until you know
Todd?
what you're building.
I'm aware that this may be an extremely stupid question, but I need
ask away.
Ask it. I just want to understand the difference. I know that Woodridge Lake has a sewer district.
Correct.
Now, I imagine that we're talking about notions of scale here, truthfully, for West Cornwall. But how is the financing different if it's a sewer district that's taxing separately, right?
Yeah.
And having it be a town line
Well,
item?
for example, if it's a formal district, then they can tax typically by statute. Norfolk, for example, is a sewer district. Having said that, when we applied to USDA for funding, they really wanted to see the full faith and credit of the town behind the
Right.
application.
Yes.
So whereas the district could have borrowed the money on their own, and they have the capability of doing so, it's one or the other type of thing. So in your particular case, my guess is you're gonna have a defined sewer district, but that's not gonna be a district in the sense of with their own financing capability. You're gonna probably have to form a water pollution control authority, and the town's gonna basically run the finances of the system.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Thank you.
So, that's to my point, which is that the Board of Finance is going to need to know there's a capital element to this, and then a yearly, annual funding portion to it. And as will the town need to know that when they
Right.
vote on whatever it is they vote for. So those things will have to get very
Absolutely.
clarified. And
Yeah.
What's the life expectancy of the wastewater plant?
Oh, hundreds of years. That's a
That's
loaded
a good
question.
I've heard you
Sewer
say
systems
20 years.
themselves are very long-lived. The Norfolk collection system's over 100 years old, well, at least like a sieve right now. So the collection system's pretty robust and lasts 50 years or more, with not much maintenance to it. The plants we try to design them for 20 years, but mechanical equipment, you guys know better than me, 5 years, 10 years, depending on the equipment. The membranes have to be replaced periodically. So
But is that the main thing, the membranes?
that's a water.
It's a machine, it runs
It's a
down.
machine.
Yeah, Yeah.
Are there insurances and warranties and all those kinds of things that get put in place?
For some period of time, not for probably terribly long.
For the membrane warranty, you're gonna look at what they're gonna charge to maintain the warranties, and you're gonna most likely elect to pay as cost when these things do wear out.
Yeah.
There are no
Because
insurance
basically you're-
policies that get...
By maintaining your warranty past a year, you're actually just buying the membranes.
So what does a membrane cost, just wild?
I couldn't even guess right now.
They're not cheap, I'll tell you that.
No, it depends on how you do that.
Did you talk to Karma about what?
And
involvement
Southwest
would be
School
in
tried,
this?
attempted to buy, I think, either
What their
refurbished or used
involvement in
membranes
all
or something
this
to that
would
effect
be.
that came from a water treatment
I
plant as
thought
opposed to a sewage
Yeah.
treatment plant. I don't think they were terribly successful. I think they finally ended up going back to the original membranes. And there's different types of membranes, of course.
I mean, do they cost $100 or $1,000 or
No,
$10,000?
It's in the thousands.
Mhm.
And then the other thing depends on what is coming into your water.
Right.
Because metals, iron in the water, damage the membranes, they require maintenance.
Yeah.
Oops.
Well,
We have awfully hard water.
this too is on the scale of stupid questions, but I would assume that there are legal contractual things that get addressed as it's getting built, and the town is, the town's exposure is limited based on, various
Oh, absolutely.
warranties and that kind of thing.
Yeah. But they have to plan ahead.
Yeah.
It's a mechanical piece of equipment for the treatment plant.
Right.
So you have to plan for things going out of service, being replaced, routine maintenance, routine replacement. So you set aside money for that.
Design issues.
Could be. They
Yeah.
typically aren't too much in that. With good operations, the operators know how to operate these things.
So they estimate, when those of us who own our homes, that it's 10% a year of the value of your house that you should consider for maintenance. So if we're looking at $6,000 a month, should we look at $600 a month as putting that aside for maintenance?
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to proffer an opinion on that, but certainly when it gets closer to that time, that's something to look at, is how much. And I've had towns in districts that don't do that, and then all of a sudden they're faced with
Right.
$100,000, $200,000 or more bill for something, motors and replacements and things, and whoa, and they've got to go back to their users and assess them with a supplemental assessment for the cost of that, as opposed to having
Certain
money.
towns will go the other way, and they'll look at can't be down
Yeah,
$100,000.
yeah.
Can't hear you, Bill, sorry.
What's that?
What did you say? I didn't hear you.
In the opposite direction, some people will be proactive and, not require a lot of maintenance, but they make sure that they have that money set aside. And they'll have $100,000 in the bank,
Rainy day.
When they need it.
where
Yeah.
they can actually use the interest they're making from that fund and pay for something.
Nobody's paying interest.
So, Jack and Bill, are there things that you'd like to talk about as far as operation and maintenance that we haven't covered or addressed before we move on to our next item?
Steve provided me enough information. Someone else has.
Gordon, do you think of anything that we should be, maybe have Bill or both of you come back and talk more about your opinions as to, how a small town, the things you were beginning to talk about it earlier in the meeting.
I talked to Gordon about tax incremental financing, which we're seeing more of.
Okay, what's that?
Tax incremental financing is you carve out a district, not unlike a wastewater management district, but it's a tax incremental financing district. And if you have a central property that the value of which could be improved with any number of types of betterments, then the enabling legislation allows the town to take the improved tax revenue stream because of that betterment and use it to pay for it
Mhm.
Using some increment of the tax increase, anywhere from 0 to 100%.
Mhm.
The key is you have, it doesn't work all that well if you, if the tide rises, all the boats,
Right.
the same value. Example, Windsor Locks has a tax incremental financing district, and they have a huge abandoned mill, which is now being converted. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen the mill.
And that's in the tax incremental financing district, and this old mill is, the value, which was burdensome, is now going to be a major asset, and it's going to generate tax revenue. And a portion of that improved tax revenue stream will be used for financing improvements in the tax incremental financing district. Groton has done this. If you're familiar with the Route 1 area in the town of Groton where the shopping centers are, that's a tax incremental financing district that has not seen much improvement for 20 or 30 years. Suffield has a tax incremental financing district, and New Britain does too. And I can't say that Cornwall would be modeled like any of them because of the nature of the West Cornwall neighborhood, but it was a topic that Gordon and I just talked about a while ago.
Right, I think one of the other questions is, because you think about this every day and we don't, can you think of other towns or other that are looking on this scale? And is the technology seems to be similar to what's being used down by the shore? Can you think of other places we could visit that has either recently put in something, we liked what we saw when we went down to the shore as far as the way these systems fit into the community settings? But
I can't identify one in Connecticut. It involves, a package treatment plant and residential housing. A condominium association would be a good model because flow is flow. It's the same kind of flow.
So you, on your list, you say New Fairfield. These are Connecticut towns covered by current WSS Connecticut staff. New Fairfield, Southbury, Guilford, Madison, Clinton, Westbrook, Old Saybrook we've seen. Are any of these towns places that might yield some interest to us for a visit? Are these treatment facilities?
Yes. Which one? New Sheriff, this is your list.
Yeah, these are the memory programs.
Yes, that we're working on.
This is down on the bottom of this.
Sorry.
We found.
These are areas where we have staff in towns, but not necessarily membrane technology.
Oh, okay.
In Old Saybrook and in Madison, we do have projects that are condos, but they are not, they're not membrane technology systems.
Okay.
So, but their system is paid for by their residents. So they may be a consideration of somebody you may want to talk to. They just can't give you a membrane technology plant on it. They can tell you what their system does and how much it costs, but it's not going to be apples to apples because it's not a membrane technology system.
Whereas the ones above are membrane technology.
Yeah, all of these above are all membrane.
But those, I think mostly were in Mass, right? Guilford Commons.
Yeah, that's in
Did we do that one?
I don't think we've been to Guilford.
We went to A Commons, right? And what's this one?
Additional copies.
Max's Place, where's that?
That's the one you toured.
Okay. North Reading Middle and High School.
Those are in Mass.
Those are Mass. Where in Mass? Oh, North Reading? Is Mass out of the question for us? It's a field trip?
Depends what type of Mass.
What's that?
Depends what part of Mass, I guess a little bit, or how close some of these that we looked at, there was one,
But let's ask, is there anything we're going to see there?
Weston, that's what they do.
Different from what we saw.
No,
I could go see that one on my own.
They're all about the same age, I think, on that list, so.
Did the whole committee hear that? Todd, did you hear that?
I'm sorry, no, I missed it.
There may
I
be
asked if
different
there was-
sizes, but the technology is all similar.
I asked if there was anything to see by going to these other places, and the answer seems to be no.
No, you never know. That's it.
There's
Well,
always something to see.
he does know.
Depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah,
Well, at least we can look where these places are. Some, the one that's processing 395,000 gallons a day seems like that's a little ambitious for our scale, but there are some that are that are newer equipment and newer installations and, you know, are in the
that,
under 20,000.
that Cotuit, where's Cotuit, does anybody know?
It's up in the Cape,
That's Cape.
yeah.
Be a nice visit
Yeah,
Next spring.
in the summer.
well, maybe
In the
there's a New York
summer,
State
yeah.
list somewhere, or do they even do membrane treatment centers?
I
You don't know?
Don't know. We don't operate the
Are any of these disposing into a waterway?
All of those, I believe, are subsurface. I can double check on the Massachusetts ones, but I believe every single one of those is.
Do you know of
subsurface.
one that disposes into a waterway?
Yeah, Sacred Heart Academy down in
Vernon?
Greenwich.
Granted,
Greenwich.
Sacred Heart School discharges to surface water.
Do you maintain that one too?
I started it up
You
about
fire?
15 years ago.
Okay.
I'm no longer with the company then. Well, the company that operated it, then it switched to another company. So I have no connection to that site, other than knowing it discharges to surface.
I mean, Steve, you would have told us long ago if you knew of one that
Yeah,
discharged
it's
into the water.
not as common for these small plants, let's put it that way.
For
And
small-
and going to a plant like that, you're not gonna see anything different than what you saw.
Okay,
You're not gonna see the outfall necessarily, you're not gonna see the discharge point to the river. You're gonna see the same technology that we've looked at elsewhere.
Do you folks have any general feelings about discharging into a river versus going underground and the leach field, which we saw, as opposed to river? I mean, generally,
I'd like to hear-
Jack just said?
what did Jack say?
say it again, Jeff.
Take the river any day.
You'll take a river any day.
Here, here.
There's
Because,
a big difference in cost between a pipe and a
Yeah.
leaching system.
You don't have to you don't have to worry about maintaining the leaching system, you don't have to worry about a failure.
Mhm.
You don't have to worry about, well, excuse me?
You have to worry about building.
Yeah, yeah, you don't have to worry about building, you still have to worry about people putting inappropriate materials down the toilet.
and do we not have to worry about the federal government changing the rules for what can be disposed of, and then having to change our system to deal with those changed regulations?
It's a membrane technology system.
Well, what if they change the percent of, I don't know, phosphorus or nitrogen that can be discharged from a system? We would have no control over that. That could come from the federal government.
That would apply to almost every facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But would they
Yeah.
be grandfathered, you know, I mean, who knows?
No.
Typically, well, the plants are designed to be able to meet those effluent requirements for today, and then potentially you can do add-on stuff for the future, and it applies to everybody. There's nobody that gets grandfathered, and if they decide by some Long Island Sound study that everybody's got to do, what they're doing now, increase phosphorus removal, that applies to everybody, whether it's a new plant or an old plant, it's got to comply.
But we would not have that issue to contend with.
Yes, you could.
Well, we,
You could.
Well,
you could.
excuse me, my question was, you wouldn't have that to contend with if you had an underground system.
Yes, you could.
How?
The regulations could change there just as easily.
That's, Woodbridge Lake is
And in fact, they are
underground.
changing. Right now, we designed to 10 milligrams per liter total nitrogen for underground systems. They're going to lower than that. I think it's maybe going down to 4 or something like that. And all those systems that are designed for 10 are going to be out of compliance. What do they do?
Isn't that what's happened in Salisbury, I've heard? That's-
Well, no, they have a different issue.
We have one site that has it.
They are.
My opinion is, it's not cheap to add technology to a treatment plant to increase phosphorus and nitrogen removal, but it's doable. Underground system that's not designed for that, could be impossible. Because many of those are relying upon dilution to get the wastewater, effluent, renovated water down to the effluent requirements required by DEP. If they all of a sudden say you gotta have your nitrogen load, there's no land for it, what do you do at that point? You abandon the system and go to plan B.
As these systems are newer technology, are they better able to treat than our grandparents' sewer treatment plant that a lot of takes places in a lot of cities and places where they're having problems? Is there any advantage to having a newer technology than the older technology?
My opinion is yes. I mean,
Is it more adaptable, presumably? I mean, if you could say, all right, we're just going to have a different kind of membrane that takes more of the nitrogen out.
it's
Yeah.
different ways of handling that, but you have a better chance of meeting those regulations with the newer technology than with the older technology,
Sure. Yeah.
without major add-ons to a plant.
Speaking of newer technology, you mentioned something about a low-profile option that you wanted to bring up. You want to talk about that?
Well, we've all talked about that. There's horizontal membranes installation. Now you have a potential company that would like to come and talk to you about that.
Okay.
Possibly, I don't know the name, I don't recall the name offhand. But another company we work with on some projects has dealt with them on various projects, and they can bring some pictures and examples of things if you so desire. They'd love to come and talk.
Would January be a good time for that, do you think?
That'd be good. They can bring a model. We can
Yeah.
hook up the town hall and see if it works.
Does that mean the whole system's underground, Steve?
I don't know if the whole system necessarily, again, I'd have to look at that, but a good portion of it could be.
I see, yeah.
And again, you put everything underground, then you deal with other issues, confined space and things of that
Right.
nature. I mean, control systems, if all that's underground, there's certain issues you have to deal with.
Is this cost estimate work for a low-profile system, or would that change?
This is a planning study estimate, Todd. We haven't designed, nobody's designed anything yet,
Right.
but I think we have enough money there to.
Okay.
And I booted it up also the cost a little bit because I was concerned about your concerns about how this plant's gonna look and the architectural treatment.
Right.
Since we're gonna be building something
Low profile.
low profile, but also gonna look like it
Attractive.
fits, attractive, fits in, as Ian might have talked about, an architect that's gonna design something that's historical looking, in keeping with the environment of the project.
This might be-
And add to the cost.
That's been the biggest issue so far, is the siding and what it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the big
Potential smell
issues.
One of the biggest issues, yeah.
Do you know the name of that company? That's-
I don't have it on top of my.
But we'll work towards getting them
Yeah.
here. I think it's January 10th or next, oh, no, December 10th.
December.
I'll have to check it on that.
That's pretty soon, isn't it?
Yeah, I would aim for the January meeting.
Okay.
I mean, they probably would, but with the holidays and things around.
All right, so I think we've covered most of the things on this agenda, except for this community input. I put you on. I know you look at me like, you're looking at me. You've been kind of one of our strongest connections to, certainly to West Cornwall. And I look upon it as really one of our biggest jobs as a committee, is to stay as transparent as possible and be available in as many ways as possible to any questions that come from the community. Does anybody have any other ideas about reaching out? Gordon brought up that there's a place, what's it called, the Union?
The Union,
In West Cornwall now.
downtown West Cornwall.
You might put
Yeah, there's some-
kind of setting into, which would allow for people to drop comments in
Yeah.
a box, or,
So there's the old pottery store is now called the Union. There's some office space there. There's some wall space. It's the Hughes Library. I think it's renting it for a couple of years. And I didn't mention the time when I was there whether we could have some wall space and just have some graphics there, some plans, some stuff, and some comment boxes, or just a piece of paper where people can put their comments. And again, have that as an opportunity.
how often is that open, do you know?
I don't know the hours. Obviously, we open a little bit more in the spring, I think. They have a grant to do some business outreach and things. So the thought is, and we could also even have like a little community gathering there once things thaw out and things get a little more defined. Seemed like just having a central place for information would be good.
Did you
in the
say
village.
Yeah,
the
that'd be
Hughes
great.
Library is renting the office
I
space?
believe the Hughes Library is renting that part of that building for,
An
office
office.
space, community use, whatever. It seems
And that's
like-
where this would be, in that,
Yeah.
their space?
Right.
So is that Libby to talk to about this?
Janet is.
Oh, Janet?
Janet is there.
Is Hughes Library now?
Yeah, Janet, Libby.
Libby too?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll reach out to
So
them and
the
see if we
economic-
can get something established that we can use to continue our effort to stay connected about this project. Any other ideas on that score?
Do you think any of the letter writers deserve a response?
Deserve a response?
No.
Okay, just asking. Was that you,
Sure,
Ian?
they're
who said that?
deserving of a response. I think
Thank you.
the way the letter read was that we would
Oh, yeah.
correspondence.
Correspondence can be addressed to the West
Yeah.
Cornwall Wastewater Committee and emailed to Ty.
Yeah. I mean, all the
Have you
meetings
heard
are
from it?
public, and if they want to continue to advocate for their positions, they can come and speak to us during the public comment portion, which we've arrived at, unless there's some other business to deal with. Gordon, anybody?
Just like to thank our friends for
Yes.
Thank you
coming.
very, very much.
Thank you.
I
Jack.
think it's a
Very
small
helpful,
state to
yeah.
try
See
to
you
go
again,
from
Bill.
here to somewhere else. Yeah.
We'll be
Good.
there. And we'll have you back, maybe next meeting. Do you want to come back next meeting? Talk more?
He
Are
lives
we
in
going to have another
Stores.
meeting,
He lives
guys?
too.
Yeah, but if,
December?
I think we should have a specific reason to have them back, not just a,
Well,
you know.
he was
is there
getting
time?
ready to
Chew the fat.
tell us a
Yeah.
lot of your opinions and your ideas.
I really, I don't have much else to say other than, we're interested in your project, and our initial interest was in
Uh-huh.
how you're gonna finance it, and what you're doing right now is, seems very appropriate.
Well, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the economic development value of something like this.
That's an interesting question, and I'm not trying to dodge your question.
Mhm.
We did a system, you familiar with the Marlboro project? That was a
Yes.
low pressure system.
Yep.
And it was a pollution abatement project.
This is
And
Marlboro, Mass? or-
Marlboro, Connecticut.
Connecticut.
It's down next to Glastonbury. And it's an interesting, technically, it's an interesting project because all the flows go to East Hampton, which is up a hill, a lot of horsepower in those pumps. And I was having a chat with the first selectwoman about the economic development impact of the project, which was initially a pollution abatement project. And she said that, there was a lot of concern in the community over the impact that the system had on the commercial area. In other words, they just put in a big Y, just built a new a new grocery store, a large one. Not everybody was happy about that. So, you have
This
to.
is before the system was
This
built?
is after this.
After.
After, the impact that the system can have. And West Cornwall seems to be geographically constrained. It's not going to grow. So,
I hadn't thought of that, Bill. That's good.
And if you can't
Big Y comes to us.
develop the commercial properties in such a way that they generate job opportunities, tax revenue, it would, because there's no wastewater collection, treatment, and disposal system that will meet regulatory requirements, and that's a big disadvantage. How can people can't sell their properties? I don't know this for a fact, but I
Well, it's an
imagine
interesting concept, the idea of sort of having businesses that move in and find success, or the existing businesses that are able to find additional uses for parts of their buildings that create additional income, if those people were willing to pay, well, that would pay in at that time.
They will pay more,
We would be
because you're going
paying-
to change their
yeah.
assessed value.
Okay, so you just change it through assessed value.
That is one mechanism.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to
Well,
go. 'Cause
this is
I mean, I'm all about the people who use it ought to pay for it, because that's how you could sell it.
But it's like, you know.
Eventually.
Eventually, I mean, how do we get through that initial period?
These are my own personal comments, okay?
Mhm.
'Cause I'm interested in this issue.
Yeah.
And that, when you make an improvement in West Cornwall, the people of the entire town benefits, perhaps not in the same magnitude. And in fact, arguably, they don't. But they do benefit. And if for no other reason, that the increased property value in West Cornwall takes pressure off increasing assessed value in the rest of the town.
Yeah.
And that's one of the primary arguments against for tax incremental financing. Now, the argument against it is that, well, you're taking value out of the incremental increase in tax revenue for the benefit of West Cornwall, and not for us who don't live in it. So that's the flip side of the argument. So it depends on, what do you want? And,
Yeah, that's very much same thing that the state people said to us when they came to sit
What's
with
the
us.
will of the- what's the
You've
will
got
of
to
the
decide.
community?"
This is your town, you've got to
Yeah.
decide.
I mean, the amount of taxable property in that little core area is fairly small compared to the tax base in the town
Wow.
as a whole. But the impact of having a vacant part of town on the rest of the town is significant.
It'd be a lot easier if we were all one village. So we have West Cornwall, we have Cornwall Bridge, Cornwall Village. So it makes it more difficult, it would be, I think the positive response and support would be a lot greater if we were just one village.
True, but the simplistic argument, and I don't mean this applies, when you're my age, your age, and you
Yeah.
don't have children in the school system, why should I pay taxes for a school
Right.
system? Well, that's ridiculous to argue, well, I think it's ridiculous to argue, well, of course we should, because it's to our common benefit.
Yeah, well, that's
So you have to
certainly a position.
decide how common is the benefit.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that'll
One
help.
man's freedom is another one's straitjacket.
sure,
So,
you make that
not to
case.
cut you short, but the public portion is now open, so anybody here would like to contribute any thoughts to this part of the conversation? Or-
Two things.
Yeah,
Is it true that the town would not be taking a vote until we knew how much money was available from the grant?
yes,
Yes.
100%.
And does the grant tie into the application? For instance, if the application says we're applying for the 13,000 gallon per day facility, and it turns out that you can build many more, a much larger facility for the same money, do you
Well, that's a good
lose
question.
that ability because the application says what it says? I don't know, to what extent?
This was a little bit of why I was pushing Steve a little more, because the grant we're looking at has a cap of $5 million cost. Steve's treatment facility, which is with the proposed EDU of 13,000, is what, 4 million now?
4.9.
4.9.
Yeah,
Or 4.9?
yeah. And 13,000 is the flow, not the EDUs.
Oh, it's not. What's the EDUs on there?
I have to go back,
Oh,
I'd be so
okay.
confused.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, anyway, the point being is that whatever plant he's designed has brought us to the edge of what the funding capacity is. So, I
Excuse
think,
me, Todd, is
you
it
can
the
you can
funding?
correct me, but the short answer is that we can't build, there may be a little bit of wiggle room.
There's some leeway. Your hands are not totally tied in this whole situation. You're applying for a certain percentage of grant, and it really comes down to whether the project is fundable or not, and it is. And you will get funding of some type.
Yeah, the size of project is fundable. So we're constrained a little bit.
Todd, excuse me, I wanted to ask you, it's not Is it that we're constrained at that, or that it changes
Well,
who funds it? So we're not really constrained, we're just, you're
becomes a
preferring
whole
to stay
different-
under 5 million because it would be to
Steve
ordinary
can
help.
answer
Yes,
this.
the funding is the same funding, whether it's over 5 million or under 5 million, it's all
So-
USDA funding. The
Right.
question is, can it be reviewed on a much simpler basis and have a better chance of succeeding under the state review process versus the national review process? We're trying to keep it as
So it's
simple.
But I
a review
understood
process,
that-
not a constraining process, it's a
Correct.
reviewing.
Correct.
Well, but I did
Constraint.
understand that he said, when we sat with them in the office, that the under 5 million was a more sensible approach for us. If we went over that, then we were into a whole different,
I'm not sure he said sensible, but
Oh, yeah, that's
he
not
did
the right word.
indicate that it would be almost a no-brainer. I mean, that's a perfect project size for a small community like this with USDA.
It's a much more complicated review process if it's got to go to the national USDA as opposed to the state branch.
Tom, does that address your question? Is this addressing your question? Okay.
That was the change in the minutes, that it would stay under state purview if it was under 5 million.
State USDA.
State, Connecticut USDA, it's that federal.
State.
Connecticut
Yeah.
State, yes.
I think, was that this meeting?
No, last
October.
I meant last meeting? But that was these minutes? Is that
It was
from these
correct.
minutes?
It it was corrected.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I thought. We did correct
Yeah.
that. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, Mark.
Vern Henshaw could not attend the meeting.
Right.
She gave you a letter.
Yes.
She asked me if I would read the letter. I don't know if that's appropriate or not.
We've all read it.
We have copies of it. We've all read it.
The thing
We all
that
have a copy.
makes it important, I think, Todd, that the letter be read, is that a lot of people are reviewing things online through the video, and they don't necessarily get to see that. So I think it's important, and I would
All right,
urge the
let's go for
committee
it.
to take the 2 minutes or less that it would take to
Go
read
ahead, I
it.
think if
FOI,
it's going to take you less time for you to read it than it's best to read.
Yes, it is.
To the West Cornwall Water Septic Study Group, regretfully, I will not be able to attend the meeting on November 19th. I would appreciate the reading of this letter at that meeting. There are residents who do not want any recycling site within the village of West Cornwall. There are residents who do not see the necessity of having a $3 million wastewater system when at present, in reality, there is only one building in need of a system. This is the former Farnsworth Bookstore, a commercially zoned building for sale that could have its own system employed as the Bain building here. There are residents who do not see the need to have additional space for commercial enterprises, nor the need for additional tourists. There are currently two businesses dependent on walk-in trade, one of which could incorporate internet commerce to increase activity. A wastewater system would not bring nor guarantee additional commercial interest. Currently, the town of Kent, for instance, has 7 commercial empty rentals. West Cornwall is part of the current trend that will transform in due time. Respectfully submitted, Vern Henshaw, West Cornwall.
Just to be clear, Todd,
Yes.
isn't correspondence part of the record of the committee? I mean, do you give those copies of these to, when you hand the minutes in?
I
I mean,
keep them in the minutes. Any communication I keep.
do we have to have a motion to do that? I don't know. What do you-
That'll be standard.
I thought I
Would
was
it?
supposed to.
I wasn't sure of the protocol. for
They should
this
go to
either.
the secretary, and the secretary keeps the file.
Okay, all right. And that's open to the public at
And I
any
did
time.
circulate
Yeah.
them to everybody. so.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you all.
All right.
I make a motion to
Motion.
adjourn.
We adjourn this evening.
All right.